Got this research paper hot off the press, literally published just today, February 5th, 2025. It's called Fault-Tolerant Quantum Algorithms for Quantum Molecular Systems, a survey. And it's all about how these incredible algorithms could like totally change the game in chemistry and way beyond.
Yeah, what's really exciting is that we're entering this new era. It's called early fault-tolerant quantum computing, or EFTQC for short. This basically means that quantum computers are becoming powerful enough to actually tackle these super complex problems, and it's opening up this whole new world of possibilities in quantum chemistry.
Early fault-tolerant quantum computing, that's a mouthful.
Yeah.
But that definitely sounds like a big deal. I remember struggling with even like basic chemistry back in school. All those molecular diagrams always look so complicated.
Oh, they are. Even relatively small molecules are incredibly complex for classical computers to simulate. It's because the number of interactions between electrons grows so fast, it just quickly overwhelms even the most powerful supercomputers out there. But quantum computers can handle this kind of complexity in ways that classical computers just can't.
So quantum computers are like the superheroes of the molecular world. That's pretty cool. But this paper mentions that quantum computers could be like exponentially faster than classical algorithms in some cases, especially if there's a suitable guiding state. Can you explain what that is and why it matters?
Sure, I think of a guiding state as like a starting point for the quantum computer. It's kind of like an initial guess that's already somewhat close to the actual solution, and it can significantly speed up that whole calculation process.
So it's like having a head start in a race. Makes sense that a good starting point can make a big difference. But before we go any further, I'm curious. How do we even get these quantum computers to understand the language of molecules?
That's a great question. We need to translate the language of molecules, which involves things like electron positions and energy levels. We got to translate that into the language of qubits, which are the building blocks of quantum information. And that's where these encoding schemes come in.
So it's like creating a translator for quantum computers to understand the molecular world. This paper mentions a few different encoding schemes like Jordan-Wagner, parity, and Bravy-Kitiev. Do they all work the same way, or are there trade-offs?
Well, each scheme has its own kind of advantages and disadvantages. Some are more efficient in terms of the number of qubits they require, while others might be easier to implement with the current quantum hardware we have. Researchers are always looking for the most elegant and practical solutions.
Finding the right balance seems crucial. Now, once we've got those molecules encoded into qubit form, what's next?
Then comes the really exciting part: Hamiltonian simulation. This is where we use the quantum computer to simulate how a molecule evolves over time. It's crucial for understanding things like chemical reactions and how molecules interact with each other.
Hamiltonian simulation. Sounds impressive. Could you break down how it actually works? What are some of the techniques involved?
Sure, there are a few different approaches. The paper mentions techniques like Trotter-Suzuki decomposition, which breaks down the simulation into smaller, more manageable steps. And there's also quantum signal processing, or QSP, which uses clever manipulations of qubits to mimic the molecule's behavior. There's even something called qubitization, which involves manipulating the system's energy levels in a very specific way to make the simulation more efficient.
Qubitization. Okay, now you're really making my head spin. But it sounds incredibly powerful. What kind of information can we get from these Hamiltonian simulations?
One of the most important things we can learn about a molecule is its ground state. This is its lowest energy state. And it tells us a lot about the molecule's properties and how it will interact with other molecules.
So it's like the molecule's default setting, its most relaxed and stable configuration. That seems pretty fundamental.
Yes, exactly. Determining the ground state is essential for understanding a molecule's behavior. The paper highlights advanced quantum algorithms like quantum phase estimation, or QPE, and also quantum eigenvalue transformation, or QET. That can efficiently estimate ground state energies and even help us prepare the molecule and its ground state on the quantum computer.
Wow, we can actually create these ground states virtually. That's pretty incredible. But this brings up a practical question. All this quantum magic must require a lot of resources, right? What about the number of qubits needed, the complexity of the calculations, things like that?
Yeah, that's a critical point. And the paper doesn't shy away from addressing the practical requirements for running these algorithms on real quantum computers. It discusses factors like the number of qubits needed, the complexity of the quantum circuits, and something called circuit depth, which is basically a measure of how many operations need to be performed sequentially.
Circuit depth. So why should someone like me who's interested in the future of drug design, why should I care about how deep these circuits are?
Well, that's a great question. Circuit depth is important because it affects how long the computation takes and how susceptible it is to errors. The deeper the circuit, the more likely it is that errors will accumulate and affect the accuracy of the results. And in the world of early fault-tolerant quantum computing, managing these errors is a key challenge.
So we need to find a balance between the complexity of the problem we're trying to solve and the limitations of the quantum computers we have today.
Absolutely. And that's why the distinction between what we call fully fault-tolerant quantum computing, or FFTQC, and early fault-tolerant quantum computing, or EFTQC, is so important. FFTQC is like the ultimate goal. It's a world where quantum computers are essentially error-free. But EFTQC is what we're working with right now. And it means we need to be very clever in designing our algorithms to be as resource efficient as possible.
It's like squeezing every ounce of performance out of these early quantum computers. But it sounds like there are instances where these fancy quantum algorithms can actually be simulated on a classical computer. The paper calls this dequantization. Why would we want to dequantize something that's already quantum?
It's not about taking the magic away. It's more about understanding the boundaries of where quantum computers offer a genuine advantage. Dequantization helps us identify those problems where classical computers can still hold their own, allowing us to focus our quantum efforts on the challenges where they truly shine.
So it's about choosing the right tool for the job, whether it's quantum or classical. This is all fascinating. But before we get too lost in the quantum world, let's talk about those classical tools. What are some of the mainstays of molecular simulation in the classical computing world?
There's a whole range of classical methods, each with its strengths and weaknesses. The paper mentions some key players like Hartree-Fock, density functional theory, and coupled cluster theory. These have been the workhorses of computational chemistry for decades, but they can struggle with the complexity of larger, more intricate molecules.
Speaking of classical methods, I'm curious.
Yeah, that's where quantum algorithms have the potential to really step in and offer a new way to tackle those previously intractable problems.
It's like they're bringing a whole new arsenal to the fight. This all sounds very promising, but how do we know for sure when a quantum computer is truly outperforming a classical one? It's not like we can have them race head to head, or if
It's not quite that simple, but you've hit on a really crucial point. Proving quantum advantage is a major challenge in this whole field. Theoretically, we know that quantum computers can solve certain problems exponentially faster, but demonstrating that in practice requires very careful consideration.
So we need to find specific problems where quantum computers really shine. It's like finding that sweet spot where they can truly outmuscle those classical computers. Are there any examples of these kinds of problems in the paper?
One of the most promising areas is in simulating quantum systems themselves. This paper actually dives into some computer science theory, and it explains that Hamiltonian simulation, which, remember, simulates how quantum systems evolve over time, is something called BQP hard.
BQP hard. Okay, now that sounds intimidating. Can you break that down for me?
Let me put it this way. If quantum problems were like Olympic sports, Hamiltonian simulation would be the decathlon. It requires mastering a whole range of quantum techniques, making it one of the most challenging problems for quantum computers to actually solve.
So Hamiltonian simulation is like the ultimate test of quantum computing strength. It makes sense why it would be like a prime candidate for demonstrating quantum advantage. But I noticed that most of this paper seems to be focused on those static properties of molecules, the ground state, rather than those dynamic simulations. Why is that?
That's a good observation. While simulating how molecules change over time is super important, understanding their ground state is often the crucial first step. The ground state determines a lot of the molecule's fundamental properties, so it's a critical piece of the puzzle.
So figuring out the ground state is like laying the foundation before building the rest of the molecular model. It seems like determining the ground state is quite computationally challenging, making it a good target for showcasing the power of quantum computing. What are some of the key takeaways from the paper about how to approach this challenge?
The paper explores several different quantum algorithms designed to solve what they call ground state-related problems. We've already touched on a few, like quantum phase estimation, or QPE, and quantum eigenvalue transformation, or QET. But the paper also dives into some interesting techniques based on random sampling and Fourier analysis.
Random sampling and Fourier analysis. Those sound more like tools for analyzing music or financial markets, not molecules. How do those methods fit into the world of quantum chemistry?
That's what I find so fascinating about this field. There are often these surprising connections between seemingly unrelated areas. Techniques from signal processing and computer science can be incredibly useful when applied to quantum systems.
So it's like using a mathematical lens to uncover those hidden patterns within the molecule.
Exactly. The idea is to cleverly probe the energy spectrum of the molecule, kind of like taking a series of snapshots at different energy levels. And by analyzing those snapshots, we can extract information about the ground state, including its energy and properties.
It seems like a lot of this comes down to finding clever ways to turn that complex quantum information into something we can understand and interpret. Earlier, we talked about the importance of a guiding state for these ground state calculations. How crucial is it to have a good guiding state?
The paper really emphasizes that a good guiding state can significantly impact the efficiency of many quantum algorithms for finding the ground state. A good guiding state is an initial state that already has some overlap with the actual ground state, kind of giving the quantum computer a head start in its search.
So it's like having a rough sketch of the molecule's ground state before you start filling in all the details. Having that sketch can make the whole process much faster.
Precisely. But the catch is that finding a good guiding state can be just as tricky as finding the ground state itself. It's a challenge that researchers are actively working on.
It sounds like there's no shortage of puzzles to solve in quantum chemistry. What other challenges and opportunities does the paper highlight for the future of this field?
One of the key takeaways is the importance of resource management. We've discussed factors like the number of qubits needed, circuit complexity, and circuit depth. These all need to be carefully considered when designing practical quantum algorithms.
That makes sense. We need to be realistic about the limitations of current quantum computers, while also pushing the boundaries of what's possible. We can dream up these amazing quantum algorithms, but they need to work within the constraints of the hardware we have today. Is that why the paper focuses on this concept of early fault-tolerant quantum computing, or EFTQC?
Exactly. EFTQC acknowledges that we're not yet at the stage of having perfectly error-free quantum computers. We need to be smart about designing algorithms that are robust to noise and imperfections.
So we need to build quantum computers that can handle a little bit of rough handling, like a sturdy off-road vehicle that can navigate that bumpy terrain of the quantum world. That brings us back to dequantization, the idea that some quantum algorithms can actually be simulated on classical computers.
Right. The paper points to the potential for the insights gained from studying quantum algorithms to inspire new and more efficient classical methods. It's a reminder that the quantum and classical approaches aren't necessarily competing, but rather complementing each other.
It's a beautiful example of how different areas of science can learn from and enrich each other. So as we wrap up this deep dive, what are the big takeaways for our listeners? Why should they be excited about the future of quantum chemistry?
This paper makes it clear that the quantum revolution in chemistry is happening now. It has the potential to transform industries from pharmaceuticals to material science.
It feels like we're on the verge of this new era of molecular understanding, where we can finally unlock those secrets of matter at its most fundamental level.
Exactly. And the key to unlocking that potential lies in developing and refining these powerful quantum algorithms. The progress we've seen in just the past few years has been remarkable, and the future's incredibly exciting.
It was truly an exciting time to be involved in this field. Before we let our listeners go, I have one final question for you. This paper has painted a really vivid picture, of quantum chemistry as this field that's like on the verge of a major breakthrough. But what's next? What's that next big challenge that researchers are setting their sights on?
That's a fantastic question to consider. We've seen how these quantum algorithms could revolutionize the way we understand and interact with molecules, especially when it comes to finding those elusive ground states. But what if we could go beyond just finding the ground state? Imagine if we could explore the entire energy landscape of a molecule.
That sounds incredibly ambitious. It's like mapping out every single peak and valley in this vast molecular mountain range. Why would we want to do that? What kind of insights could we gain from having that complete map?
Well, right now we're mostly focused on just finding that lowest point in that energy landscape, that ground state. But molecules aren't these static entities. They're constantly interacting with their environment, absorbing and emitting energy, and undergoing these complex transitions. To truly understand these processes, we need to understand not only the ground state, but also those excited states and how the molecule moves between them.
So it's not just about finding the bottom of the valley. It's about understanding that entire mountain range, the peaks, the ridges, those hidden pathways, connecting them all. It seems like a pretty daunting task.
It is. But the potential payoff is enormous. If we could map out that entire energy landscape, we could gain a much deeper understanding of how molecules behave in real-world conditions. This could have profound implications for fields like catalysis, where controlling chemical reactions at a molecular level is key.
And this is where quantum computers could really shine their ability to explore like multiple possibilities simultaneously. Seems perfectly suited for tackling this kind of complex multidimensional problem.
Exactly. Quantum computers are uniquely equipped to handle this kind of exploration. It won't be easy, and it'll definitely require developing new quantum algorithms and more advanced hardware, but the potential rewards are immense.
It sounds like the future of quantum chemistry is going to be just an incredible journey full of challenges and groundbreaking discoveries. I'm definitely feeling inspired to learn more.
It's a truly fascinating field, and it's only just getting started. So to our listeners, I encourage you to keep a close eye on the developments in quantum chemistry. The quantum revolution is happening now, and it's going to change the world in ways we can only begin to imagine.
That's a great note to end on. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of quantum chemistry. It's been an eye-opening experience.
The pleasure was all mine. Until next time, keep exploring and stay curious.